Alrighty guys, so Tesla, obviously stock got hammered here today, 5.5% down today, right? So here's the deal, okay? First off, they're now obviously doing the 1 month trial, which is something I had talked about months ago. That was something I believe they should do, okay? Now, on top of that, they also just announced a couple days ago that they're going to now start selling FSD at $99, which is obviously another thing that I said they should do a couple months ago, right? Now, people in my private group are saying things like, do you have Musk number or something, right? People had, suggested to me that I reach out to Tesla. I make some moves here. The individual in the private group said, have you ever considered going to a Tesla event, asking them to do that? Others have done things like that before, right? I'd be shocked if Elon didn't take a question from you or listen. And I responded to that. I said, I messaged some people and, I don't need to go anywhere to make moves happen, okay? Now, if you guys ever read the book before, Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, it's really, really valuable. And a couple of tricks I'll kind of utilize in a situation like this where I want a company I own to make certain moves and things like that is, first off, I have to know the right people so I can kind of get my message through, right? And then how I'll go about doing it is very much a Dale Carnegie type way that I'll do it in a way that's not like demanding, not in a way that's like, hey, here's what I think we need to do. Here's why I think we need to do it. No, that's not the way you need to go about doing it. I'll make moves in regards to this by, sometimes I'll even say, hey, somebody came up with a great idea. What do you think about this idea? Blah, 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 right? And as long as I get through the right people, it comes across as like, maybe it's not even my idea. Could you imagine like how many people would sign up for this? Hey, everybody's so used to paying less than $100 for subscription services. Like, what if we did something like, less than $100 and things like that, right? And you can attack it through that way where it's not coming across as like, you're trying to push your agenda that you're trying to do, where you're kind of like, kind of skating around it and things like that, right? Which can be much more influential versus, hey, we need to do this because we're not doing this. That comes across as demanding, and people that are in positions of power, they don't want to go through that. And so one of the best things you can do to kind of win people over in those sorts of things, in these sorts of situations, is make them feel like it's their own idea. Right? That's the key. Let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. It's so dang valuable, right? And then obviously I can get a lot of people to kind of parrot my ideas that I might have, right, out there, because videos get a lot of views, and then so the decision makers at certain places are then being, kind of heard this idea over and over again. And then if I can kind of get in contact with the right people that I know, boom, it gets right up the ladder and it can get things through that wouldn't be possible otherwise, right? And so that's a very valuable thing. By the way, one other valuable thing for you guys that I think will help you out tremendously in your life is this one right here. This is more with loved ones. People get in bad arguments, the relationships break up, things like that. If you are wrong, admit it quickly. That's the bottom line. I do that all the time, okay? If I get in an argument with somebody and they make a good point and I realize I'm in the wrong, admit it right away. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, I say, you're right, 100%, you're right on that. Let them win that, okay? And then if you need to make points off of that, you can make points off of that. But if a lot of people get caught up into this and they never want to admit anything wrong, and so no one's going to even respect your opinion if you can't even admit you're wrong in a situation, okay? So anyways, that's a phenomenal book. If you never read that book, you can work wonders in this world, I can tell you that. But the problem is a lot of people's egos are too much for this, Okay. Tesla's going to lay off more than 10% of their global workforce. Now, this is something I definitely was not pushing for, but I understand this is something the company has to do. As we prepare for the company over the next growth phase, it's extremely important to look at every aspect of the company for cost reductions and increasing productivity. Elon Musk memo to the employees, and we'll speak about why this is actually bad for the stock price in the short term when you think it wouldn't be, right? Over the years, we have grown rapidly with multiple factories scaling around the globe. With this rapid growth, there's been a duplication of roles and job functions in certain areas. As we prepare the company for our next phase of growth, it is extremely important to look at every aspect of the company for cost reductions and increasing productivity. As part of this effort, we have done a thorough review of our organization and have made the difficult decision to reduce our headcount by more than 10% globally. There's nothing I hate more, but it has to be done. This will enable us to lean, innovative, and hungry for the next growth phase cycle. I would like to thank everyone who's departing for their hard work at Tesla over the years. Deeply grateful, blah, blah, blah. For those remaining, I'd like to thank you in advance for the difficult job that remains ahead, right? Talks about obviously the company's future. Now, you might say, why is this bad for the stock price in the short term? Because usually you would think this has to be good for the stock price. Well, something very important to understand about Tesla employees, a huge amount of their comp, many of their comps, and I've known a lot of Tesla employees over the years, much of their comp is in stock, okay? It could be stock restricted stock units, it could be stock options, it could be their employee stock ownership plan. There's a million different ways, okay? But the bottom line is many times over 50% of your true comp comes in the form of shares, right? And I've known a lot of people that worked at Tesla over the years that had a ton of shares of Tesla and ended up retiring from Tesla because they made literally millions of dollars and just ridiculous sums of money, right? And so if you're talking about a situation where a bunch of employees are laid off, right? Well, guess what they're going to likely do? They're likely going to sell shares, right? That's just like a natural thing. You get fired from your workplace, you're going to end up selling shares in that particular workplace. It's very, very common. Some might keep their shares even though they've been, laid off, fired, whatever you want to call it from Tesla. But a lot of people end up selling shares, right? And so, in many situations, a company's stock price would go up a bunch if you heard about layoffs or, a bunch of employees are being laid off in a situation like this, but not for Tesla because there's an understanding that a lot of shares are going to be dumped on the market from a lot of employees. It's not a small amount of people that are let go in this situation. Those people own, if you look at a collective, they own a lot of shares in the stock, which could put a lot of selling pressure on it in the very short term here, okay? Alrighty, so where I wanted to start out today's video is the layoffs, okay? Now, the reason I want to start here is because I would say most people are not educated on Tesla's history, what has happened and transpired in the past, and so they see certain things going on and they think it's something that just happened out of nowhere and it's like never happened before, okay? I saw this from Sawyer put out on his X today. I thought this was great. It says 2017, 2% of headcount got laid off. 2018, 9% of the headcount. 2019, 7%. 2022, 10% of the salaried workers got cut. And then 2024, 10% of headcount got cut here, right? Now, here's Tesla's revenue throughout that time period, right? This was the first layoff in 2017. Their revenue was $11 billion. In 2018, they did their second layoff, which was actually much, much bigger than the first layoff, 9% headcount there, right? And $21 billion went up to 24, right? Nowadays, we're at about $100 billion roughly run rate, somewhere in there, that ballpark, right? The third layoff, 2019, when the company was doing $24 billion. The fourth layoff in 2022, when the company was doing $81 billion and coming off of a year when they did $53 billion, right? And now we got a fifth layoff in 2024. So if you look at something like this, right, it's very important to understand these layoffs have happened before, and yet the company grew revenue substantially and doubled, tripled, quadrupled up revenue in very short amounts of time, even though there was layoffs going on, right? This is also Tesla's annual employee count. This shows you how many employees Tesla has, right? And look at when they did their first layoff in 2017, the company had 37,000 employees. Well, today they have 140,000 employees, right? And even after you factor in this 15,000 roughly count of employees laid off, it's still going to be a gargantuan number compared to where the company was doing their first layoffs and second layoffs and third layoffs over time, right? That's pretty incredible. Now, you also look at Tesla's net income over that time period, right? When the first layoffs came, Tesla was hemorrhaging money. They were in a horrible position. There was a lot of people that thought Tesla was going to go bankrupt and they weren't going to make it out to the other side, right? And the company lost nearly $2 billion on the bottom line in 2017, right? And they brought that down in 2018 to under $1 billion of losses, right? And then in 2019, when they had that third layoff, they lost about $862 million. In 2020, they flipped it to profits, and then obviously the profits have grown immensely over the past few years, right? And so the moral of the story is, in regards to this, right? Layoffs do not mean Tesla's doomed. If you don't understand Tesla's history, and you don't understand that this is the fifth layoff in the company's history, right? Or at least in the recent years, Tesla has been able to grow massively over time and still add to employees. And don't be surprised if 3 years from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, Tesla has way more employees than what it has after this cut. Which this cut might take them down to 120-something thousand employees. Don't be surprised if in a few years from now, you see Tesla's employee count at 150,000 or 250,000, okay? Do not be surprised at all. it is actually more likely that Tesla is about to go through its next big growth cycle. Because if you look at the past, when they did these big employee cuts, right, these layoffs, very shortly after, there was actually a big growth coming for the company, right? 2017 into 18, right? And then obviously 2019 into 2020. And there was still substantial growth even when they did that 2022 cut, right? Coming off of that year to kind of where the company's going now. So the moral of the story is this does not mean Tesla's doomed. And I thought we needed to get that out of the way first and foremost in regards to this situation. Next up here, Cybertruck, right? Once again, this is the most talked about, debated vehicle in the history of the internet. It's ridiculous. Every day you can't go anywhere on the internet without hearing or seeing something in regards to Cybertruck. It's incredible, right? So, Cybertruck. Now people are worried that Cybertruck, there's delays because there's some sort of issue with the accelerator, right? Now, this is the 5th vehicle that Tesla's really ramped into any sort of pretty decent production, right? The first one was the Model S. The next one was the Model X. From there was the Model 3. And from there was the Model Y. Now let me ask you a question, okay? How many of these vehicles did they have production problems when they were in their first year? I'll show you. 3. 3 of the 4, they had major production issues in the first year of that vehicle, right? The Model S, the Model 3, and the Model X all had a multitude of issues, especially in that first year that they had to sort out and fix and problems. And guess what we're seeing with the Cybertruck? The same exact thing. The only vehicle Tesla's ever ramped that was, I would say, pretty smooth was Model Y. But why was that? The reason that is Model Y was basically a Model 3, just a bigger version. It was extremely similar to a Model 3. And so that was very different than anything Tesla had done before, because the Model X was very, very different than the Model S. The Model 3 and the Model Y were like babies, okay? So in regards to this situation, it should not come as a surprise or freak people out that Cybertruck has this issue and that issue, and they got to work out all these kinks in the first year. That's also why I never buy a Tesla new model in the first year. Do you see me running out there to get a Cybertruck? I could even get a Cybertruck right now if I wanted to, because I've been a Tesla shareholder for so long, and they'll move you to the front of the pack if you're a Tesla shareholder. I don't want a Cybertruck right now. Let me get a Cybertruck next year. That sounds good to me. 2025 at some point in time, because I already know they got a bunch of issues. They got to work out all those issues. I'm fine. Like give me one next year once you got all these kinks and problems worked out, and that's cool with me, right? Now, also, this should not come as a surprise that this is difficult when ramping a new vehicle. Tesla's gone through this before, right? Remember production hell? This is way back from 2017, 2018. Elon Musk would talk about production hell and what was going on for the company and how much struggles they were having and how difficult it was to ramp the Model 3 up to big volume. It was an extremely stressful time in the company's history. Obviously, they were losing a fortune during that particular time frame. And there was a lot going on, right? And there was a lot of people that thought kind of that 2017, 2018 time that Tesla was going bankrupt, right? It was a very difficult time. So for them to be going through some sort of production hell now, let's say in Cybertruck, doesn't come as a surprise. And I'll say this because I've been such a follower of Tesla for so many years. I'll say Cybertruck's been much smoother than production hell from Model 3, in my personal opinion, from kind of what I've seen out there, okay? Now, next thing we got to talk about is a little bit on the stock price, right? Because you got to understand what's going on with the stock price and the different dynamics at play. I pulled you up a 3-year chart of Tesla here, okay? Now, there's an epic amount of bag holders in regards to Tesla stock. Bag holders is basically a derogatory term to describe people that have been holding the stock for a long time and have done nothing but lose money on that stock, and they're down, right? And basically, outside of this little time period right here, which I actually picked up some Tesla shares here, outside of this little time period right here in very late 2022 and the very beginning of 2023, which was like a month or 2 month span, outside of that little teeny time period, if you have bought Tesla at any point in the past 3 years, you're down on your shares. Down on your shares. You're what the shorts and the bears would call bag holders. Now, the reason I tell you that, and the reason it's important that everybody understands this, is we are going through a very important phase in Tesla's stock price history right now. We're going through a phase of what I call make or break. Make or break investors. And this is a time period when certain people that have been bullish on the company are throwing in the towel. They've just done with it. The stock has gone just pretty much down for 3 years, and they're finished. They're like, they're sick of seeing all these other stocks make money, and they're like, why do I want to keep trying to be in this Tesla stock? Bad news after bad news after bad news after bad news. I'm moving on, right? And that's how you get selling pressure on a stock. Even if you're in a bullish market, a stock can keep going down if you just continue to get people putting more and more selling pressure, more and more selling pressure on it, right? But you also have a very other side of this story that happens and emerges when something like this transpires. And those folks are what I call diehard longs. You can't break these folks. This is a group of individuals that emerges, and they are the diamond hands. You cannot break their spirit. You can't break their soul. They're on the mission for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They're thinking about where revenue is in 2030. They're thinking about where net income is in 2032. These folks are thinking way out to the future, and whatever goes on here in the short term is just little money anyways. It's just breadcrumbs. They're going after the loaf of bread, okay? So you have these two things happening at the same exact time, right? And one group of these folks, they look at Tesla stock going down, and they say, thank you. I want to pick up more and more shares. You got a group of folks that are saying, this is a waste of money, capital. I could be making money in savings accounts. I could be making money in treasuries. I could be making money in Nvidia and all these other tech stocks. And I'm in the stock that is the bum stock of the whole group, right? And so this is important to understand. This is going on literally right now. Like this is what's happening right now, okay? So you got to understand that weighs on a stock price, at least a little bit in the short term. But what has a much more negative effect is this. Tesla execs, 2 of them, right? These folks own a lot of shares. You add on another 15,000 employees that got laid off. It puts so much selling pressure on a stock in the short term. It's a very short-term phenomenon. We're talking it really matters for like anywhere from a few weeks to maybe 2 months, okay? In terms of the big kind of downward negative effect from this. But when you talk about major executives that own a lot of shares, there's a decent probability those executives will cash some shares, right? When you talk about some maybe middle managers that were let go and some other folks, it's just a lot of people that own a lot of Tesla stock because a lot of compensation comes in that. And so it's very negative for the stock price of this company in the short term, okay? Now, one other thing, side note, that I think is very important I mention here in regards to these executives leaving the company, very important I mention this. These individuals left on great terms. If you look at the commentary from Musk and these guys on X, it was nothing but like love and respect. These guys left on very good terms. It was not some sort of, let's call it ended bad. And no one wants to talk to anybody. And, if they have nothing nice to say about each other, okay? It's complete opposite of that situation. And so I look at that as a very much a positive thing because it can go either way when you're talking about executives departing a company. It goes really just one of two ways. Either there's a lot of love and respect and admiration there, or the two sides hate each other and they can't wait to get out of there. And it definitely wasn't that situation, right? Now, next up here, this has to do with more Tesla's competition, right? Which these are all Tesla's short-term competitors. Are these companies still around 10, 15, 20 years from now? And are these companies competitors to Tesla, in 2035? I'm not so sure about that. I'll just be honest with you guys. But for right now, they're Tesla's competition. Now, for these guys, inventory is starting to pile up. If you look at days of supply of these vehicles, and I bet you these numbers are going to get worse over this next few months. I mean, inventory is piling up. Alfa Romeo's 228 days of supply. Audi's at 108 days of supply. Chrysler's at 184 days of supply. Dodge is at 255 days of supply for Dodge. Oh my gosh, go get a Hellcat. Holy smokers, that's no jokers. Ford is at 108 days of supply. Genesis is at 156 days of supply. Infinity's at 138 days of supply. Jag's at 176 days of supply. In Jeep, man, I did see so many Jeeps at this one dealership I went by this past weekend. It was ridiculous. I'm like, holy smokes, I got a Jeep for every person in Arizona, I think, at this place. 183 days of supply for Jeep out there, right? And these were numbers as of several weeks ago. Once again, I would expect these numbers are going to get worse over the next several days. So inventory keyword is starting to pile up for these guys, and start going by dealerships now, and you're going to start to witness, oh wow, what you saw 2 years ago is not what you see today. Now, there's two companies that are holding up well, I would say, in this situation. Those companies are Toyota and Honda. And that's really about it. Now, the reason those two companies are holding up so well is why? Well, they produce cheap vehicles, right? Camry, Corolla, Honda Civic, Honda Accord. These are very, relatively cheap vehicles, and they're great on gas mileage, right? Which is gas prices are very elevated. We all know that. And so people are looking out there and they say, wow, Toyota Camry sounds good at Toyota Corolla. If they're not sold on EVs yet, right? Because there's a lot of people that aren't sold on EVs. They got all these questions. They're like, heard negative things. Like, I don't know where to charge and I can't charge, all that crap. Okay. And so the bottom line is these two companies are doing well. Basically, everybody else is doing bad. So the moral of the story that I see playing out here is I think the margin pain that Tesla has felt over the past 1 to 2 years, big traditional auto is going to feel that over the next 1 to 2 years. Traditional auto had a lot of inventory to fill over this past year or two. Because if you went by dealerships a couple of years ago, even 18 months ago, those babies were empty. And so there's kind of been a lot of catch up here, getting days of supply back more balanced. But I think this is end up going to lead to big traditional auto is going to feel margin pressure over this next 1 to 2 years. You may say, how does that happen? Well, automakers typically place incentives on older models and slower sellers. Included on the list are cashback offers, special interest rates, discounts. All these sorts of things hurt margins. They all hurt margins of the automakers, right? And these are all things that get much more probable when your days of supply start getting higher and higher and higher. Because next thing you know, if your dealerships are loaded with inventory, right? Because everybody sells in the dealership model except for Tesla. If dealerships are loaded up with inventory and you got your new models coming out, what do? You have to start saying, okay, we'll give you cash back here, we'll give you special finance, and all these things that end up hurting your margins because you're like, we gotta move this, guys. We gotta get this inventory because we've got the new models we need to get in. And so this sticks you in a real bad situation. And this is why in recessions, automakers can many times go bankrupt or just face an incredibly hard time. And the reason being is all of a sudden, imagine, you don't have nearly as many people buying autos and your dealerships are loaded. And all of a sudden you're stuck with a situation like, wait, we're producing all these vehicles. We can't sell into them. You got to start discounting. You got to start shutting down production lines. That creates a whole mess. Next thing you know, your margins are going boop, 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 bad. And next thing you know, you could go from making huge profits to taking huge losses. And that can all happen within 12, 24 months. It can happen quick, really, really quick, okay? And so this is all something that's playing out simultaneously. Now, in regards to Tesla, it's a very different situation than I think what these traditional automakers are about to go into. Tesla actually is raising price. Yes, raising price. Now, this is something I called out months ago, and I said, I think Tesla's going to start raising price as the year goes on, okay? Now, this came out of Reuters last month that Model Y was going to raise to $43,900 and $48,900 for their rear-wheel drive and their long range. Now, I just checked Tesla's website. They're $44,900 and $49,900. So I don't know if Reuters was inaccurate or maybe Tesla went up $2,000, but that is something that's going on. Tesla's, if anything, is raising price now at this point in time, okay?